Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about the Pitt Season 2 Episode 13 at 7 PM. Spoilers for the episode as always, and this is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you very much to Alison for making the pick. So we've got a couple episodes left. This one had a lot of emotional sort of, again, payoff feels like the wrong word just because we're not at the end yet. Like some of these will probably have some more developments, especially the Robbie stuff. But a lot of big kind of like, coalescing elements from all over the season are kind of like coming together here a little bit in this episode. And I think I like the idea that there's no big event this season, like the mass casualty thing last season, that sort of keeps everyone after time. It's more like clerical, where a lot of them are just staying back because they have to like transfer and scan all of their paperwork into the computer system now that the computer system's back up. And that's why Whitaker's around, it's why Santos is around, Mel's around, and they're getting kind of roped into doing other things while they're doing that, but that's effectively why they're still hanging around. And then some of the other characters, Dana's, covering for the other charge nurse, Robbie's just not leaving until his friend's scans come in, and he's still concerned about everyone else. He has more concerns this episode that might convince him not to leave, potentially. He still very much wants to, seemingly, but we'll get into all that stuff. Maybe we'll start with that stuff, actually. Robbie's in a lot of scenes, obviously, as he usually is. And he has concerns about Alishimi this episode because he notices her kind of freeze up and hesitate and sort of stop talking during a prominent moment when she's explaining something to some of the other doctors and students. And he notices this, and he's determined to ask Samira about it because Samira's worked with her before, and when he finally does, one, it's kind of notable how he just kind of brushes past the things that Samira thinks she's going to have to talk about. She thinks it's going to be about her patient who's returned, which is a big thing in this episode. I'll save that for talking about her, though. But he just kind of brushes past it, says, oh, no, I'm sure you did your best. Anyway, I want to talk about Dr. Al. I want to talk about her and ask these questions. And she doesn't really have anything from her past experience with Dr. Al, but does admit that she noticed something like during today's shift with the baby way back in like episode 2 or 3, whenever that was, and he says that to him. And so he's thinking about Dr. Al, and it's not so much that I think, like, I don't think we the audience think Dr. Al's not fit to cover for him in his absence, but I think he sees this moment of hesitation and starts to think, oh, I'm needed here, right? She can't hack this, she can't cover for me, therefore I'm going to have to stay. Now, whether that's because he's looking for an excuse to stay, which is something I did consider in the moment, or it's just something that makes it feels more like a burden where I just can't leave these people, they're going to be so lost without me, which is what the ending of the episode kind of leans more towards implying. But yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of him waiting for his friend's test results, and he does finally get them, and he sees them. It's not good news. He talks to a surgeon, finds out that while he wants this surgery done as quickly as possible, it'll maybe be a week before they get him scheduled because he has to go through these other bits and pieces first that the surgeon tells him. And Robbie's not happy and basically thinks that if he doesn't go for it, he's not going to. And there's also a chance that maybe this thing that he's got will kill him before then. The surgeon does point out he might have had this thing for like years by this point, and the extra week, might not necessarily kill him. I mean, it might. There's a chance, obviously, but Robbie is then further concerned by that. And the big thing here is that there's a couple times in this episode where he's kind of told off by Dana for talking about stuff in front of everyone in the main part of the ED. And I can't remember what the first one was now that I'm trying to remember. There's a lot going on in this episode, but there's definitely some storylines sort of intermingling where he's giving his thoughts or opinions on something and whatnot. But the two that I do remember, one is at the end, of course, which I'm about to get to, but the other one is when they're talking about Samira's patient who returned with the serious injuries, and he starts speculating that he's got a decent chance of survival, but that's maybe not what the guy wanted. That, because he had 100,000 plus in debt, medical debt, maybe he was actually trying to make his family's life easier by taking himself out of the equation. And he doesn't finish his thought. He's starting to go down that sentence, and Dana catches the patient's wife coming out of the room and like loudly says her name to make it clear. And Robbie like quickly turns around, and Dana's kind of saved his ass from possibly her overhearing him theorize that her husband might have been trying to kill himself. So, like, that's a really good moment, and it really feels like Dana's on the ball and knows what she's doing. And it looked a bit weird that Robbie was voicing this so openly, loudly. Yeah, I get why he has these concerns, and we've had, you know, several scenes throughout the seasons now of concerns sometimes when one of the doctors thinks that maybe a patient is a risk to themselves or a risk to others or whatever. But it tends to be a lot more cautious and you know, a lot more discretion than what Robbie was doing here. Now, whether or not it's because he's genuinely starting to crack or he's starting to just not give a crap, that's also possible. There's a lot of reasons why, you know, things are just piling up and he's not really caring anymore in one way or another. But then the one at the end, which is the big thing that leads to the final scene of the episode, is when he gets the results back for his friend. He has this conversation with the surgeon. He gets frustrated and bangs his, I think it's his cup or his thermos on the table and you know, swears loudly. And Dana's like, "Oh, you need to take a walk," and kind of like make sure he like walks off. And it leads to, we cut away for a couple of things first, but it leads to the final scene of the episode, which is Dana and Robbie, where Dana's like, "You need to like talk about whatever's on your mind, like right now." And it's actually a really good, I mean, it's a good scene from a performance level, from an acting level, but from like a surprising side of things, like what surprised me about the scene was how sweet it was, at least in the sense that, well, obviously Robbie's been a bit of a dick today, right, on and off, and he has definitely had moments where he's talking down to other characters and he's come off as kind of unlikable. And I've talked about him being at the end of his tether, like, repeatedly throughout this entire season at this point. I think what caught me here is that when he starts listing all the things that are on his mind, and he talks about, okay, his friends are concerned, he's worried that Whitaker won't be able to look after his stuff, he's worried that Samira might burn out when he's not here because she's kind of on a tipping point and he can recognize that. He's worried about, you know, Langdon relapsing, he's worried about Dana, you know, he sort of like, you know, when she says anything else, he's like, "Yeah, and you, I'm worried about you." While he does phrase it in a very like confrontational way, and it's not like he's saying it in this kind of like thoughtful, like, you know, it's not a thoughtful sentiment he is giving, but I think it's actually quite a sweet moment. And I mean, you're actually thinking about it even just a little bit, because it feels like he's listing everyone that he cares about. It feels like, you know, he brings up Javadi because he was concerned earlier in the episode that Javadi wasn't maybe like taking advantage of opportunities, and as he puts it in this scene, like not advancing or moving up because she's ignoring what she's good at or she's not living up to her potential. And it felt like everyone he mentioned in some level, he cares about them, which is very interesting that I'm saying that because Langdon was included in that list. And I think that feeds back into their previous argument an episode or two ago, where this idea of Langdon kind of being this sort of surrogate son of his and him feeling this way. And it's not a surprise that, once again, that subject of surrogate parents comes up here when Robbie says to Dana, "You're not my mother." And she's like, "Well, tough, you've got me," or something like that. But she doesn't say, "I'm your mother," but she says, "Tough, like I'm here." So it's kind of like, all right, you make the best of these situations. He also kind of drops that his mother left when he was young, and that's maybe something he's always had dealing with in his head ever since long before he was a doctor, certainly. So, but I really like that part of the scene. Obviously it ends with the bombshell of him saying, you know, "What if I don't come back?" and walking out of the scene in this sort of cold moment, right? That's our cliffhanger for the episode. It's a good cliffhanger to end on, and sometimes I don't know when the cliffhanger is going to hit in the pit, because not every episode has an obvious ending. Sometimes it does just have to kind of cut to black, and it's like, well, I guess they didn't really have like a big hook for the end of this one. This one's a hook, and it's an emotional hook because we've been building to it the entire goddamn season. But I love this idea of like, sure, he's kind of manipulating his head a little bit, and he kind of sees this as these people all need me, rather than admitting that he needs all of them, right? That's the thing that he maybe needs to learn in some capacity. He needs to let them in to his life as much as he cares about their life. But there is kind of something nice about this idea of him actually caring about all these people, including some that he has actively been berating and has got all this really weird beef. But is that any different to a father who's kind of disowned their son and for something they did that they are not proud of, and so on and so on? Like, you can see the parallels there so easily. And I think this scene really hit home the complexities of the character and all these little moments of his reactions to things and the ways, like, just acting a little bit out of sorts, right? Whether it's in this episode, I'm saying these things out loud in a very unprofessional manner. Previous episodes, we're seeing him like rub his eyes and get exhausted and tired, or just be fed up with what's going on. Like, it's all been building, and it feels like it's kind of expertly kind of coiling up until this moment. And I think there is a heart to this story. It's why no matter how much of a dick he's acted like this season, there is a heart here. Like, he does care about these other people. They care about him. There is something genuine here, and you hope that the right characters realize it before it's too late. Like, that's kind of like the potential tragedy of it. It's, you know, it's almost like a much smaller scale. You've got the Whitaker Santos stuff of her clearly not wanting him to move out and making little digs about it, even in this episode again, and him saying, I don't have to live at Robbie's, I can just go and check the plants and come back and just stick around and live with you. And Santos just so far has refused to actually admit that she wants that. She just will not say it. And I feel like we're building to it. The finale, I'm almost willing to put money on it that Santos is finally going to suck it up and say, I don't want you to move out. I like having you here. Especially the little part where she asked about, are you still going over to the farmer's wife's place tonight? And he's like, yeah, I think so. And it really made me think of her taking those scalpels a couple of episodes ago. And I was thinking, oh, she's like, she wants him to be there tonight. She doesn't want to be alone. And she's too scared to admit that she just wants him to be there. She's so bad at being vulnerable, which to be fair, like, I actually, for all the shit I give Santos, and I do think she has a lot of stuff to give shit for, I actually find that part very relatable, bizarrely. Sometimes some people do have a tough time being vulnerable and letting other people know how you feel. I have at times felt that way myself. I kind of get it. I get that part of it, for sure. So, no, but really well done. Speaking of, there's a sequence here, right? So they're all doing their scanning, and eventually Mel's involved with this as well, and she's also scanning. And they put some paper in the shredder. I guess after they've scanned the documents, they shred them for privacy reasons or whatever. And the paper jams in the shredder. And they're like, okay, well, put it in reverse, give it a little love tap. And they just one by one, they give her suggestions, and she tries to fix it and unjam it. And eventually one of them says, kick it. And Mel just kicks it really hard that it kind of goes flying into Santos's leg. And it just goes to this wide shot of the three of them. And I genuinely believe that the laugh that Santos has in this moment was not intentional. It looks like the actress herself, Isa, is just laughing because it was a really funny thing she just did, and it went further than they expected. And they just kept it in because contextually it still fit the scene. It still fit that she was laughing at this, and it was kind of nice to have her share a laugh with Mel, because it's nice to see Santos be nice to other people. She almost gets there with Whitaker, almost, but we'll see how that progresses. And speaking of, I've got stuff to say about both Mel and Whitaker. Who do I want to pivot out to? We'll go to Whitaker first. And there's some parallels between both Mel and Whitaker in this episode, actually, which is really nice. But Whitaker, at a certain point, gets tasked with going to see Ogulvie, because Ogulvie is been missing, right? He was gone all last episode. We know he went up to surgery with the guy. And it's when Whitaker and Santos are scanning stuff, and they're like, where's Ogulvie? Where's he been? They look up to see how the surgery is, if the surgery's happened yet with the patient that he went with, and they find out that he's been dead for like 40 minutes. Like, he died on the operating table, and it's like, where's Ogilvie? And I think we, the audience, immediately get, oh, this has probably broken him. This is like, as much as, I've been saying he needed some humbling all season, it's safe to say that this episode and the last couple have absolutely humbled him. And I love that when Whitaker finds out where he is, Emma spotted him when she was leaving. He goes out and finds Ogilvie, and he's just sitting there in the scrubs. He looks distraught. He's staring into space. He's lost it. I love the callback here to season 1, because Ogilvie gets effectively a heart-to-heart from Whitaker, but he gets it sitting at the back of an ambulance, and it's just like the sequence towards the end of last season. It was before the mass casualty, to be fair, so it was a little bit earlier, but it was the scene between Robbie and Collins last season. And what I especially liked about it is not just this idea that we're going to have maybe a big heart-to-heart in the back of an ambulance once per season, which is amusing if they keep that trend for next year. But I just really loved that Whitaker's the one in the Robbie spot, because we've done a lot this season with like Whitaker doing some of the things, teaching some of the things that Robbie taught him to the younger characters and the newer students. And him being in this position of like, we get the same kind of shot from behind them as they're sitting in the back of the ambulance, the daylight kind of starting to go down behind them. And he's like, going through, he tells the story of the person he lost in season 1 and talks about how it hit, how there was nothing he could have done, and he's clearly learned a lot. And I was going to say hardened there, but he's not hardened, because that's kind of the point, is that Ogilvie says, do you ever get used to it? And he's like, no, you don't. You just kind of have to make peace with it. But they talk about Ogilvie maybe switching to another, type of medicine, something that is less stressful than emergency. And Whitaker's like, yeah, maybe that's the right choice for you, but like, I'd be bored. And he swears. Whitaker drops an F-bomb, which felt particularly notable, because as soon as he said it, I was like, has he said that word before? Have I heard him drop an F-bomb in this entire show? People are swearing left and right. We're on HBO. They're doing whatever they want. But I feel like Whitaker has been very clean cut. And if he has sworn, it's not been a lot. Like maybe he did once in season 1 or something. But it really stuck out when he swore and said he'd be bored as F, because it felt like this moment of real honesty and being like, no, I like the challenge of emergency care, of having to quickly diagnose things, of trying to help people in the worst day of their life. And he says, go home, sleep on it, and wait until tomorrow before you start to decide if you want to come back or not. So we'll see if he does come back potentially once we get to season 3, but he sends him home. I like all the advice he gives him, but more than anything, I love just how much of a neat bow this was of Whitaker's character from the start of season 1 to now near the end of season 2. It felt like this is all the growth he's had, some of it between seasons, some of it we've seen in the seasons themselves, but hearing him speak with this passion and confidence about what he thinks just feels so nice. He really, in a lot of ways, he really is. He's our Huckleberry, I guess. I don't even know what Huckleberry means. Santos says it about him, but it's become a thing. So, fair play, I guess. And the reason why I said this sort of parallels with Mel a little bit is that Mel also gives a pep talk this episode, but notably gives it to one of the kind of older guard in Langdon, because Langdon, they're treating a boy with breathing problems this episode, and they talk about the cost of inhalers and Medicare, and they go into some of those details and stuff. But ultimately, Langdon feels like he missed something that someone else catches, and the solution ends up being quite simple. He wants to try something that's definitely risky. They know it's risky, but it may be the only option. And then someone thinks of the solution, and it ends up being as simple as cutting his basically just cutting into him and poking his lung back into place effectively. I mean, I'm sure that's not exactly what's happening, but that's what it looked like. It was just like, stick a finger in there. It was the equivalent of just slapping the TV in the side to get it working again, effectively. But he feels like he's failed. He feels like he missed something, and he almost put this kid in a very risky position because he didn't think about this solution first. And I like this because, if I recall correctly, there was definitely... Wasn't there a scene in season 1 where Langdon gave Mel a pep talk? I feel like there was. Maybe I'm misremembering, but I feel like I remember her sitting on the floor and him sitting down next to her to give her a pep talk. Maybe that was someone else. But regardless, I really liked this flip of Mel being the one to sit down and give him the pep talk. And it felt especially nice because of all of her character stuff this season, where she was just mortified by the deposition like most of the season, to the point where it felt like we didn't even get proper Mel like for 2/3 of the season. And she started to come a bit of herself again in this last batch of episodes, but this moment really felt like it felt like she'd learned something because she saw Langdon blaming himself, thinking he didn't belong back yet, and that he'd messed up and that he's not good anymore. And she's like, look, I had to listen to lawyers today tell me I was a horrible doctor, or at least imply it. And, like, I don't know about that, but I know you're a good doctor. I know you would have caught it. And it basically just gives him like the pep talk. It's I believe in you. And Robbie's already going for a while. I don't want you to go as well, which also felt like a very sweet thing to say. So I like this idea that some of the younger characters from season 1, while they're still relatively rookies in the grand scheme of things, they've already grown so much, and in some cases they're mentoring the even newer students, and in some cases they're even offering teachings to some of the older people. And I think that's a nice sentiment, because it's this idea of like, older people should still be learning things and can learn from new ideas from a younger generation and so on. And not that that's exactly what's happening here. This is more just the idea that everyone's susceptible to all these pressures in one way or another. Now, speaking of someone who feels like they might have failed, we have to talk about Samira. And all the stuff going on with her this episode. I actually think I forgot to mention last episode that her patient, the one that walked out without telling her who needed his meds, he came back injured. He'd fallen at work. And they do some theorizing as to why he might have fallen. Heat may be the obvious thing that she suggests. And that's kind of why Robbie ends up theorizing what he does about that he intentionally did something to deal with it. But and it's really sad as well when the wife shows up and didn't even know he left the hospital. She came to the hospital thinking he was still here from earlier and he'd got in a room. And, we cut away before Samira has to tell him, but we see Samira's face, like, and where she realizes she's going to have to break all this news to her. And it's really sad. But, she goes through the ringer. She's like, getting snappy in the room with the other doctors. She's not really responding to them very well. She's clearly got a lot of weight here on her shoulders and a lot of guilt, and she's feeling somewhat personally responsible. And even the wife at one point is saying, why did you let him leave? Kind of thing. Why did you? And it's like, so that's all weighs on her. However, what really gets her, though, when she's already feeling so down, is later in the episode, Whitaker, not intentionally, of course. In fact, he's trying to be nice. He says, I'm sorry to hear about your patient. And she says, oh yeah, he's got like an okay chance, but it was pretty rough. And he's like, oh no, I don't mean him. And he realizes as he's speaking, oh, you don't know yet. And what he's talking about is the patient that Ogulvie was also tied to. She was kind of working that case with Ogulvie, and she doesn't know that he died. So he has to break this bad news to her, and she runs off. And that's the last we see of her this episode. It really feels like she's had a rough day. She's had a big day where one patient she was working with has died. Another one, as we find out, is going to be like worst case scenario. It'll be a year before he can take care of himself. Sorry, that's best case scenario. Sorry, worst case scenario is that he will need constant nursing for the rest of his life. And the irony of that, interestingly, is that the wife is told that because of what he has now, this severe disability that he'll have, it'll make him eligible for everything that he wasn't eligible for before. Now they'll actually get a lot of help. Which is just dystopian, frankly. It's just sad. Like, bending backwards to try and pay bills that they couldn't afford and all the rest of it. You're not eligible for all this help. But now you are. It actually, in a bizarre way, paid to get worse. It paid to get less healthy. Now, I'm not saying he intentionally did it for that reason. It's probably more likely, if it was intentional, it would have been more what Robbie was suggesting, I would assume. I think this wouldn't be something he would have thought of, honestly, because it's insane to think that way. But that's the dark irony of it, and it kind of highlights the system being a lot less than perfect, shall we say. So yeah, so you got that going on. I mean, who have I not talked about as of yet? Really, I guess Javadi. I mentioned Robbie's concerns with Javadi, but earlier on she was declining the offer to assist with the neurosurgeon who happens to be someone that knows her mum and is very friendly and says that she went to her mum's baby shower and makes some small talk. It's all very pleasant. And she says, hey, do you want to assist me? And she says, Javadi just says, I'm good, which I felt unprofessional. It's one thing to say, no, I can't for some reason. It felt like another thing to just be like, nah, I don't want to. And Robbie kind of like comes over and is like, hey, this is kind of a good opportunity. Like, you've got the head of the neuro division down here. This is a big deal. You should absolutely do this. And effectively just sort of like accepts it on her behalf and says, no, you need to do this. And while he is obviously, like, you know, it's not the most gentle push he gives her here. It's very much, I'm telling you to do it, so go do it. So it's not the nicest way he could have said it, but there is like a genuine place this is coming from, it felt like to me, where it was like, no, he wants to push her when she doesn't believe in herself. Now she does say she's tired, she says it's been a long day and all that, but Robbie's theory here when she says that is that, no, I think this is more about the fact that you still feel guilty about that mistake you made earlier on. That thing you didn't catch that even your mother chewed you out for, you're thinking that you can't do well now. No, you can. Go help the neurosurgeon. And the neurosurgeon like talks her through like drilling into the brain with this wind up thing and all sorts. And it goes, you know, that part of it goes well, and it seems like she actually gets into it as she's doing it. So it felt like he was actually, his heart was in the right place, and he probably was right for prodding her into this. Maybe the actual way he said it could have been maybe, you know, sugar-coated a little bit, but I mean, that's the nuance of having a character who is coming off as very abrasive, but heart's in the right place. Yeah, actually, which reminds me, something Santos said this episode that was funny, is that when she helps Cassie with a patient who's like been bronzing herself and all sorts, but she's got a bad liver. Turns out to be some spice she's having far too much, or some herb that she's like, it's good for something, good for inflammation, but she's been having like a ridiculous dosage of it, and it actually causes liver problems. And Santos, when asked how she even thought of that as a potential thing, says, well, I usually just think of the most stupid thing someone could have done, and often it might be the case. And it basically gets really cynical to the point where Cassie's like, hey, like, come on, that's a bit. But Santos does not back down and says, hey, I'm not mad about it. These stupid Fs keep us, you know, working. Like, our jobs would be less secure if all these stupid people didn't do stupid things to themselves. This is good for, and you know what? Mackay just is like, you know what? I'm not even going to, like she gave Ogilvie the pep talk about being nice to the patients, but it's not like Santos is saying this to the patients. So she's just like, you know what? Fine. I'm just going to walk off. I'll accept the silver lining you've offered me, and we'll leave it there. I think. I will say, actually, just one little thing worth mentioning. The old charge nurse who's helping Monica, she, like, last episode there was a little moment with Javadi that I never brought up because I just forgot about it, but she kind of called Javadi a snowflake because Javadi told her she wasn't meant to smoke out where she was smoking. And it was like, okay, I mean, I'm getting like a bit of a boomer kind of vibe from her. And then notably this episode, she was kind of given some glances when Dr. Al and I didn't catch the young night shift doctor's name, but the young, basically the night equivalent of all of our young doctors for the day shift. They speak, I think it was Armenian, they spoke to each other, and Monica gives this side eye, just this sort of like, you know, like getting. I wonder if she's, because they were talking about Jesse and they were talking about what happened with the ice later in the episode, and I was kind of expecting her to jump in and like take the side of ice. To be honest, I was kind of, it felt like we're kind of setting her up for having some pretty, let's just say, dated views on things. At the very least, I was getting racist vibes during some of those moments. But I wanted to mention that because I feel like it might be building to something. At least maybe not like a huge blowout or anything, but I feel like there might be something at some point where she might clash. Which I guess I should mention as well. The night staff are all kind of here. Abbott's back. You know, going around doing stuff. We also have, I'm forgetting her name, Dr. Parker, or well, Dr. Ellis, it'll be, yeah, Dr. Ellis. Parker's her first name. We saw her earlier in the season. She was the one who gave Mel some advice about the deposition. But she's here. Shen, or smoothie drinking doctor, is back as well. So they're all around. They're all kind of doing stuff. And so, yeah, more on that a little bit later. Because I'm sure there'll be more for them in the next couple of episodes to talk about. But I will mention, just before I wrap up, I am aware of some casting news that came out in the last day or two about the show. I am not going to talk about it because I saw it, but I do think that some people would like to avoid that news because it would be a spoiler, potentially, about someone either leaving or coming back, kind of thing, right? The casting news can be that, and I think until the season's over, I would consider it a little bit of a spoiler. So you know, I'm not going to bring it up, but just in case someone comments saying, "Hey, did you see the casting news about it?" I did. I'm aware. I intentionally did not bring it up, and I could have brought it up when talking about a certain character this episode, and I went out of my way not to. So it was a genuine choice on my part. Anyway, I suppose the one other thing I didn't talk about, I mentioned Emma leaving, but she had a lot more stuff with Dana and the homeless guy. Was it Digby? Who they basically, it's a little wind down task for the end of the day, since he's such a nice, pleasant patient. It's like, let's go and offer him a shave and a haircut. And, you know, there's some bonding with him and getting to know him. And he mentions that he danced at his daughter's wedding, and he cries a little bit when he sees his reflection once they've finished cutting his hair and all the rest of it. It felt like the feel-good story when everyone else is imploding around the place for a lot of this. Although, to be fair, I think like most of the studenty or younger characters, I feel like were mostly good vibes this episode. But all the characters who are like at least in their late 20s and up were all imploding throughout this episode. However, this little plot with Emma and Digby, and it's a nice little bookender to her story as well, because one of the first things she did in the entire season was have to like hose this man down. So I feel like a nice humanizing element to end the day with, like, oh, he's a real person. He's got this history. He's got family who might want to find him and care about him, and it's just a sweet kind of moment. But and that was the other thing when she's leaving. Monica's like, "Oh, why aren't you staying to pitch in?" And I was like, "Oh, what are you saying? Like, let her go home. What are you talking about?" It was her first goddamn day. Yeah, not getting the vibes that I like Monica very much, but yeah, we'll see how that stuff plays out. But I wanted to mention that as a nice little subplot this episode. But that's me. That's me talking about this episode 13 of season 2. We'll only get a couple left, and we'll see kind of how things finally pay off. And I think the emotional climax of this episode makes me feel very confident about some big emotional scenes in the next 2 episodes, perhaps between certain pairs of characters that really need to have the moments that they're building to. Robbie and Langdon being, I think, one of the biggest ones, more than anything that I'm looking for. But anyway, that is me. Thank you very much for joining. You can, of course, tell me what you thought of the episode in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff helps out a bunch if you can. And of course, you can support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube membership. Thanks to everyone who already does. It does make everything possible, both here and over on the Mail Fuzz Movies channel where all the movie podcasts live. But that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?